Okay then, it's time to delve into some more Overwatch League action that we saw over the weekend. I do apologise if I'm slightly off today. It is very, very hot where I'm recording right now, and I can't have any form of cooling on because it messes with my audio. So this is going to be fun. Anyway, this weekend, it's been rather clear-cut, I would say. There hasn't been too much in terms of surprises. I didn't expect there to be too many surprises. Again, when you go into a hero pool, the first week can be a bit more of an erroneous week, like you see going into the league. But then, as people work out exactly what's good and what's bad, things start to settle down, and you start to see, well, things work out the way you'd expect them to. So, this week we saw a few less fixtures than last week, 12 fixtures instead of 14, I believe. But we started out with the London Spitfire taking on the Dallas Fuel. This was no surprise that the Dallas Fuel get a 3-0 over the London Spitfire. Dallas Fuel. Oh, Dallas Fuel. Sparkle. Just. He rolled London. That's so bad. Like, it wasn't funny. Like, oh, you see Sparkle on Junkertown get a 4k Dragon Blade. Then in the next fight get 5 kills Vanilla Genji. Like, it's not even fair. It is not even fair. It was not close. London could not compete with the quality that Dallas Fuel had. Easy 3-0 for the Fuel, as you would expect for a team of the Fuel's caliber. London Spitfire. GG goes next. Moving on, Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Vancouver Titans. So, this was a little bit of an interesting one because Vancouver Titans now had Changsik on the main tank instead of Shredlock, who had now retired. Changsik playing from Korea, though, is going to be a little bit of an off one. Gladiators, they were looking to find some consistency this weekend, and that's exactly what they found. They didn't just get the win over the Vancouver Titans, they got a 3-0. And actually, I expected the Vancouver Titans to take a map because they tend to have this knack of taking maps, the Vancouver Titans, even against the best. But they didn't. Kevster looked really good, so did Birdring. The tank lane was far outdoing what Vancouver Titans could pull out. And actually, we've seen a lot of Scoot this weekend from the Vancouver Titans, and he's impressed as well on the Brigitte. So, I think it's been a very good weekend for the Los Angeles Gladiators, and it's really brought them back up to where we expected them to be, competing with some of the best in this league. And it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain this sort of performance, especially when we talk about the performance later on against their second opponent of the weekend. But now, for the first time this weekend, or over this weekend's fixtures, we move over to the East region, where we take a look at the teams competing in Asia, Korea, etc. And this started off with the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Los Angeles Valiant, or Immortals Valiant. This, again, was not close. This was a 3-0 for the Shanghai Dragons. That's exactly what you want to see the Shanghai Dragons doing to the team like the Valiant. The Valiant have no way of competing with the Shanghai Dragons. There is just nowhere near enough quality, nowhere near enough team play, nowhere near enough coaching. They're by far the inferior team, and it showed. Shanghai Dragons get a very good 3-0 victory over the Los Angeles Valiant, and it's exactly what they needed. There's not much to say about it. Dragons are just better. Smile. Moving on, New York Excelsior taking on the Seoul Dynasty. This was an interesting one. Seoul Dynasty, this is a meta that should favour them, and in the end it does end up for a 3-1 for the Seoul Dynasty. I think that's exactly what I predicted. Excelsior, they compete. But unfortunately, when it comes to a team like Seoul Dynasty, this is where they're just going to have a little bit too much. That's always going to be the case for now, until this New York Excelsior team develops and starts to compete with the top teams. But it's definitely going to take time. And therefore, they're not quite ready yet to take down a team like the Seoul Dynasty. They did, however, obviously take down the Philadelphia Fusion last week, but that was a kind of an erroneous sort of thing. Philly were definitely playing not their best, should we say, and Excelsior took advantage of that, and that's good. If you can take advantage of teams that aren't playing their best, then Excelsior are going to do well. But Seoul Dynasty were not off form here, so this was a great win for Seoul Dynasty, exactly as expected. But moving back over to the West region, we are back in action with London Spitfire again as they take on the Houston Outlaws. This was the Texas doubleheader for London this week, and it as I thought, resulted in 0 maps gained for the London Spitfire. This is a 3-0 for the Houston Outlaws. We saw Dreamer, we saw Jagu, we saw Jake. Yes, we saw Jake on DPS as well, and we saw Jake on Mercy. We've seen Jake on a lot of things, actually. And it's nice to see Jake getting a lot of time. Jake Mercy's kind of pog, not gonna lie. So, yeah, it's not too surprising this is a 3-0 for Houston. Again, they far outweigh London in terms of quality team play. Every department. London, this is their final match of the June joust. Once again, it's a winless month for London Spitfire. And, yeah, what can we say? What can we say? Sparker will be becoming eligible for the hit scan role for London Spitfire next month to be promoted from British Hurricane. He is a massive prospect, a very fantastic DPS player, but I still see London struggling even with Sparker. I don't think they've got enough. Hybrid is not the only issue with this London team. It is going to be a long, hard journey. But the next 2 months of play are definitely where London can start getting some wins on the board. They'll start taking on teams like Vancouver and Paris. This is where they have to start winning because these teams, they're by far too good for them. Moving on after that, we see the San Francisco Shock taking on the Toronto Defiant. This is a 3-1 for the San Francisco Shock, not too surprising. Control was a little bit of an outlier where Toronto kind of messed around and got some results. But San Francisco Shock stepped it up this week, which is what we expected after that bad experience in the main melee, shall we say, at the end of it anyway. They really stepped things up. San Francisco Shock are still changing some things up though. You can quite clearly see that with some of the substitutions and changes made to the lineup. But Smurf is in. Smurf is looking his best he has this season. Much better than he looked in the main melee, which is exactly what you want to see. You want to see Smurf now step up because it's his meta. It's going to be where he does his best. It's going to be on heroes that he likes playing, Winston, even some of the Orisa at times. It's going to be right in Smurf's ballpark. So this is where he has to really kind of get down and get stuff done. Toronto Defiant, obviously working with Aspire on the hit scan DPS role right now with the COVID problems that Toronto Defiant have been experiencing. Aspire actually looked very good. I think he didn't look out of place in the Overwatch League. Maybe a little bit out of place on Defiant, but again, he's subbing in. He's a 30-day contract. We have to take that into account. Toronto were not at their best here, but they did put up a fight, which is something you want to see. They didn't just roll over and get 3-0'd, which is actually fairly commendable for a team that is not expected to compete with the Shock. Shock are champions. Toronto with COVID issues in the back room and with some of their players, and playing with an unfamiliar player on hitscan DPS. I think you have to commend the Toronto Defiant here, even though they don't get the win in the end. So, moving on, Atlanta Reign versus the Los Angeles Gladiators. This, again, was a match I expected to be quite close. I actually expected it to be closer. This was a 3-1 for the Los Angeles Gladiators. This Gladiators actually further impressed me this weekend with that performance, because this was, again, a game that I half thought they could drop. I thought Reign might sneak a win. And if they did, that'd be really worrying when you think about it. For the Gladiators, when they were predicted to be one of the best teams in this league at the start of the season, you really don't want to see them falling to someone like the Atlanta Reign. But Los Angeles Gladiators have rallied clearly between the main melee and the June joust, got stuff together, and now they look like a nice, organized team that are getting good results. This is exactly what I would have expected from them this week if they had been up around the top 5 after the May Melee. So this is exactly what I want to see with the Gladiators if they want to be one of the best teams in the league. You can expect a drop a map to Atlanta Reign because they're a good team and they give the best some issues all the time. Now the next test for the Gladiators is to go up against someone like the Fuel or the Outlaws. I want to see the Gladiators beat the Outlaws if they want to be one of the best teams in the league. That's for sure. Because the Outlaws are sort of, they're the gatekeeper to Dallas Fuel, if you see what I mean. Dallas Fuel is that level above them. But Dallas Fuel have got another thing we have to talk about a little bit later in these fixtures. We are now moving over to the East region for the final time of this weekend's fixtures. New York Excelsior taking on Los Angeles Valiant, Immortals Valiant. Oh, New York Excelsior, you've done me proud. 3-0'd the Immortals Valiant. This is a very good result for the Excelsior, because this shows they are getting the work done that they need to get done. They are sweeping the teams they can sweep. And it's just, you can see the difference. You can see the more organised play. You can see the team just gelling much better than the Valiant. And this shows that New York Excelsior have got actually crazy potential. Actually crazy potential. What we thought they might have coming into this season. And now, you're starting to slowly see it come forward in this June joust especially, as the meta's sort of favouring them when you can put Yakban on Winston. It's starting to really bear fruit. You're seeing them beat the Valiant. The only erroneous one is when they lost to the Charge. That's the only problem with this June joust right now for the New York Excelsior. You'd expect them to lose to Seoul Dynasty. You never expected them to beat Philadelphia Fusion, and they did. So, this has been a good June joust for the New York Excelsior. It's a 2-2 record. It may see them through. We cannot confirm that yet, but I kind of hope it does, because I want to see Excelsior do some stuff in a knockout environment. But after that, we saw Seoul Dynasty taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Now, funnily enough, I predicted Seoul to win this. I have to eat some humble pie here. Seoul Dynasty, not gonna lie, kinda through. They wanted to force a lot of hog, with gesture on the hog, and that's just a no. To be quite honest, that is just a no in this matter. Why are you not running the gesture Winston or the gesture Orisa? Just stick to that. I don't know why they tried to force the hog. And Shanghai Dragons, they just exploited them. It was really weird. Really weird. They were putting all of their eggs in the gesture basket, and at the end of the day, if you're up against a high tier team, hog is counterable. Very counterable. Especially when someone like Anna isn't banned. And yeah, this ends up as a 3-1 for the Shanghai Dragons. I think this could have been so much better for the Seoul Dynasty. I think this is it's poor choice of hero selection, it's poor choice of the route to go down. The hog didn't work, this hog Zarya didn't work, and it's cost them, I think. It's really cost them, and it's a shame, because I thought, honestly, this would be a phenomenal game this weekend, and it petered out into Shanghai Dragons kind of dominating in the end, which was really sad to see. But we move back to the West region for the last 3 fixtures. Toronto Defiant taking on the Houston Outlaws. Houston coming off the back of their 3-0 over the London Spitfire. Toronto Defiant coming off the back of losing 3-1 to the San Francisco Shock. Toronto Defiant still with their DPS issue with Aspire in on the hit scan. I will get there in a minute. Houston Outlaws still obviously experimenting a little bit with Dreamer and Jake sometimes coming in as well. But Houston looking darn stable. And they've got the 3-1 over the Toronto Defiant to prove it. So this, again, Houston Outlaws have a little bit too much class for this Toronto Defiant roster. This Toronto Defiant roster is not helped, obviously, by its COVID issues. I will keep highlighting that, because, again, that's going to be very disrupting to a team. It's not just the 2 players that are missing. It's also the fact that, well, their backroom staff, some of them may be isolating. And so it's all going to be very disruptive to the team. And therefore, I think we have to commend Toronto for putting up a good fight this weekend. Despite 2 losses, they've not gone down without, kicking and screaming, if you see what I mean. Houston Outlaws, though, great weekend for them. This is exactly what you want to see. I don't mind them dropping a 1 map to the Toronto Defiant. Toronto Defiant are a kicking team. They are definitely going to be, fighting. Unlike London, we expect Houston to sweep London. A 3-1 against Defiant and a 3-0 against London is exactly what you wanted from a Houston Outlaws perspective this weekend. And again, it's putting them right up there at the top of the league. And that's exactly where Houston want to be, and they want to feature in the June Joust playoffs. And that's very highly possible at this point. So, Houston Outlaws, fantastic weekend for them. Fantastic weekend for them. And they are exactly where they want to be. Second to last fixture, Vancouver Titans taking on the Atlanta Reign. And as we always expect with the Atlanta Reign, they sweep the teams below them. So this is a 3-0 for the Atlanta Reign. Vancouver, very rough week. But then again, we didn't expect too much from Vancouver this week. They are going to have to make some adjustments after with Changsik. It's rough. But hopefully longer term for the Titans, and I'm talking like distant long term here, but longer term, I think the Titans are going in the right direction. They've looked more competitive than we expected this season, and now they're making some interesting additions. And I think further down the line, Titans start to develop and start to grow. And that's I think a very slow process, but it's exactly what you want to see. And then we come to the last fixture of the weekend, the blockbuster that we've been waiting for, Dallas Fuel versus the San Francisco Shock, revenge versus domination. And Dallas, obviously, as we know, knocked San Francisco Shock out of the main melee with a sweep. It was quite brutal. We did not see Pine. To anyone wanting to know, we did not see Pine at all, I don't think. However, we did see Dallas Fuel play slightly more meta, Reaper Echo, and it was a really close match. A lot of the fights were very 50-50. It was definitely the closest match of the weekend, and that's despite the scoreline. This could have gone another way. Dallas really could have got first map, honestly. It's rough for Dallas, don't get me wrong, but it's also not the end of the world. I could see Dallas Fuel and Shock over the course of this year being a tennis match. One beating the other, then beating the other again, then beating the other again, and going back and forth. Just like it did with Titans and Shock back in the day. I think this is going to be still a very hotly contested match. However, for the Shock, Smurf stepping up. You've seen Glister step up as well. Glister had a really good time, especially on Dorado. We're also seeing Striker start to turn up with Nero on the Echo. It's starting to look better for the Shock. And we're starting to see also Violet sometimes pick up the main support role. We've seen Violet Lucio and Violet Mercy this weekend, which is something we haven't really seen before. And I think that plays better to Shock, because sometimes FD God's a little bit too aggressive, feeds a little bit too much, and I think Shock are now kind of reining that in a little bit, and it's working. So, and also they're obviously playing Violet on the main support role for the Anna Brigitte, where Anna will be played by Twilight. It's definitely been a really good weekend for the San Francisco Shock, and this is exactly what they needed. This is the bounce pad sort of they needed, the propulsion they needed to start pushing on and getting back to the Shock we expect. Again, it's not clean though, so there's the Shock are still weak. The Shock are still recovering to an extent, I suppose you could say, and there are still teams that can very heavily contest the San Francisco Shock, Dallas Fuel being one of them. So it's going to be super interesting to see if the Shock can continue to push forward. But those are our results from this weekend. Next weekend we go into the final round of fixtures and knockouts. It's going to be a bumper weekend. We'll be taking a look ahead of that in a couple of videos time, just after Team of the Week, which will be coming out very soon. But for now, all of the socials are linked in the video description as ever for Illusion Gaming and myself. Give them a follow on the Twitters, give the follows on Twitch as well, and join the Discord to have a good discussion there about Overwatch League and all things Overwatch and outside of Overwatch. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.